Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Seubert's webinar, your HR Technology Roadmap. Today's focus will include the importance of data integration, integrity with that data within a technology ecosystem, and a process for effectively identifying best-in-class HRIS vendors. My name is Eric Ream. I lead the benefits practice at Seubert Associates. Myself, along with Stephen Hansen, who is a strategic partner of Seubert's, will be leading today's webinar. Stephen is a technology consultant that specializes in HRIS solutions, including the understanding the market landscape and helping our clients create efficiencies by utilizing specific HR technologies. Little housekeeping items before we get started. We're looking to run the webinar approximately 30 minutes of content followed up by a Q&A session. Those questions can be submitted in the Zoom chat function at the bottom of your screen. We are also recording today's webinar and we will be sharing the slides with all of you. And I hope to address all questions at the conclusion of the webinar. So at Seubert, we continue to invest in resources and ongoing education to ensure our consulting teams are prepared to address our clients' needs from a technology standpoint. Looking back and looking forward, we're heavily involved during the implementation process to make sure benefits are accurately represented and to make sure that technology is functioning as it should be in a manner that was intended to. Additionally, this pandemic has created a need for more efficient employee engagement and alternative modes of communication. So without question, leveraging technology allows employers to create efficiencies across HR processes and also increases accessibility to employees. These items include streamlining enrollment, improving healthcare literacy, expanding benefit offerings that allow for choice and personalization, and increasing transparency to more clearly illustrate the total value of an employee's benefit plan. So within these verticals, there's advantages that technology brings to leverage human capital in a more efficient manner. And as professionals and leaders within our organization, we all face common challenges regardless of our size or industry that can be addressed one way by leveraging technology. So we're in a spot where we're trying to leverage our benefits to attract and retain employees. And the technology answer to that allows us to more efficiently communicate the value of benefits to employees and their families. Technology we helps us centralize tools and resources to make them easier to understand and accessible to employees. So as the volume of these tools and resources increase, it's going to be more imperative that we centralize this one way. And we have some legislation coming down the pike with the No Surprises Act and balanced billing. Carriers and TPAs are being required to start publishing hospital price transparency. So where's all that going to go? Coupled with that, increasing benefits visibility in a clear and concise way is important. So eliminating barriers to accessing benefits information through multi and duplicate storage locations is an advantage of embracing some kind of technology. And then, as most of you know, if there's efficiencies within HR as far as streamlining some processes within our day-to-day lives. So in summary, there are a variety of reasons to make sure you're getting the most out of your Ben admin or any component of an HRIS system. And finally, as our workforce ages, we're getting younger, it's important to understand how generational needs differ and provide the venue for communicating benefits and integrating within our company systems. So with that, I would like to introduce Stephen Hansen. And again, if there are questions, please submit them in the Zoom chat at the bottom of the screen, and we will work through those after we get through our 25 minutes of content. Thank you for joining today's webinar.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me, Eric. I appreciate everybody hopping on today to chat about HR technology. I'd like to kick things off by just kind of illustrating how we should think about technology from a high level. So it is the path of data that seems to complicate things, but as we map out our different technology tools, we need to think about what data is coming into the platform, how we access it, and what data is going to be sent out of the platform. Now, the advanced data functions will help us figure out what platform will do what we need it to, but before we even get there, we need to understand all the pieces and the flow of the data. So try to keep this mindset as we talk through some of the various platforms, and we try to build our HCM ecosystem. So just what is an HCM ecosystem? Let's start with just HCM. It stands for Human Capital Management. It's frequently used when talking about technology platforms that can aid HR across all or almost all of its functions. So if we look at the basics, it starts with payroll and HRS. Now, it's not uncommon for organizations to purchase these two platforms from the same vendor, simply because many payroll companies also have nicely developed HRIS systems. We all understand the payroll function, but it's important for these two platforms to talk because typically HRIS is your single source of truth for employee data. The salary changes, title changes, address updates, this data all lives here in the HRIS system. So next we have what's commonly the most platform that's mostly standalone, right? And that's benefits. So benefits programs are unique across different groups. Many times a robust and configurable Ben admin system is a must. So in this scenario, benefits is going to receive inbound employee information from the HRIS tool. And then once employee elections are made, it sends outbound deduction data back to payroll. Now, additionally, benefits platforms are also integrated with multiple carrier platforms. I bet many of you are familiar with EDI files, and that secure FTP or file transfer protocol. That methodology can be used to exchange data within your HCM ecosystem, in addition to just transmitting that data to carriers. As we follow this employee lifecycle, it's important that we integrate the recruiting activities of an applicant tracking system and an onboarding platform. Employee information is first entered into these platforms by the employee before eventually being validated and landing in the HRIS and payroll systems. If we look at time and attendance, I'd like to highlight that again, employee demographic data is flowing into it from the HRIS. I know my arrow there is from payroll, but it'll come from the HRIS tool. And this is where employees are going to enter their time, overtime, make PTO requests, and then that data flows back to payroll so it can be applied to their compensation. Now, similarly, if we look towards learning management and performance management, respectively, we'll need demographic data flowing in, and then the results of the employee efforts flowing back to HRIS. So as an example, this could be a final performance score or a completion indicator for a training course. So I want to take just one more pass through this ecosystem we've built here. Employees are going to enter their own data in the applicant tracking tool. It's then validated by HR, and then it flows to onboarding or directly to HRIS. At that point, the employee's data will go to benefits, where the employee will actually enroll in benefits, and their choices are sent to the carriers, and their deductions are sent to payroll. Then they start clocking in and out, or if they're salary, they may just record project or task-related data. But that flows back to payroll, so everybody gets their check, right? If they don't get their check, they might throw rocks at the building. But before moving on, I just want to mention that having every single one of these platforms broken out is not the norm for companies with, say, under 1,000 employees. What we see here would probably be more in line with, what would be implemented at a larger employer that would further integrate with an ERP system or a global HCM solution. Many times, the majority of our HCM ecosystem can live on one vendor platform or at least be purchased from one vendor. So the purpose of this slide is really just to illustrate the possibilities, the path of the data, and then hopefully spark some discussion about what makes the most sense to break out for your organization and its needs. So now that we have kind of a baseline of what technology we're talking about, I want to talk through some of the hot gossip in the vendor marketplace. And by the way, the total market is made up of thousands of HCM organizations. I mean, this slide is not at all encompassing the entire market, but rather it's just some highlights and new products that I want to talk about today. So the first is UKG, right? This is Ultimate Software and Kronos merging. Now, this is actually a little bit of old news. I think everybody's familiar with UKG. I think they're even on like the Miami Heat uniforms, right? So they've got some good brand recognition, but customers can now purchase Ultimate Software and Kronos products potentially, from under one contract with the same service team. But more recently, UKG also acquired an organization called Ascensus. This is just back in December. And Ascensus had this product called NovaTime. And NovaTime does some things that even Kronos time and attendance systems couldn't do. We won't get into those details, but suffice it to say, if time and attendance is at the top of your list of things that are important for your organization, UKG has to be on your short list of organizations to look at. I also want to talk about PrimePay. So PrimePay purchased this company called SyncHR, and SyncHR is the new technology face of PrimePay. It's one of the newer platforms in the space, and as such, it has a really slick user interface, and it's completely modular, meaning you don't have to be a payroll client to purchase standalone products. ADP, their benchmarking tool, it continues to be among the best in the industry, offering a lot more than just salary data. This is touted as the company that pays 1 in 5 Americans, and they have a lot of data to play with. Now, in addition, ADP has rolled out a really robust service model that's actually a buy-up option. Now, it's quite affordable, but that package deal makes it a pretty compelling option for organizations, I think, between about 200 and 2,000 employees. Now, Workday, right? It would not be an HCM webinar if I didn't talk about Workday. They are beginning to move slightly down market, really only towards high growth, high revenue organizations, things like an NFL franchise. Workday is still super expensive, and we'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. Ceridian has developed a diversity and inclusion reporting tool that helps identify things like pay equity issues, and it displays relevant demographic data. They've also rolled out on-demand pay. So this allows employees to collect their pay in smaller increments at whatever frequency they wish. Now, I want to be clear, many other vendors have those types of features at this point, but Ceridian was among the first to pilot those. Now, Infinity HR, BirdDog HR, and ExactTime, those organizations all merged to become Arcoro. They're one of the few, again, modular companies where you don't need to buy payroll, you don't need to buy any of their products. You can buy them all as standalone platforms. Arcoro is really focused on the construction space or even the construction adjacent spaces, which they would call the high compliance industries. I want to talk just a little bit about Alight as well. So Alight, they were Hewitt Associates. They then became Aon Hewitt. Recently, Aon sold them to a private equity firm, which rebranded as Alight. So Alight just went public again last year for the first time, and they acquired this organization called Hodges Mace. And Hodges Mace had this mid-market benefits administration tool called SmartBen. That is now the Alight mid-market tool, right? So they've got 2 technology platforms, but I think for all of us on the call, SmartBen would be the most relevant. And I think it's cool because Alight was historically this organization that's been doing HR outsourcing for, 80 years or so. So they have all of that knowledge of the HR space coupled with this kind of new tech forward direction with a new technology platform. So I think it's a pretty cool offering from them. Business Solver. So Business Solver has this product called Sophia, right? It's their decision support tool. And they're saying that it's AI built by Amazon. And I want to pause there for just a moment. I love emerging tech, you guys. And Sophia is an awesome tool. However, it's not AI, right? And I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. AI does not exist yet. We are just, on the cusp of machine learning. Machine learning is in its infancy. And this is all really cool stuff, and it's no knock against Sophia. Sophia is awesome, but I just wanted to let everybody know, be a little wary of any organization that's promising you AI, especially in the HCM space. We're just not there yet. I want to talk a little bit about Workterra. Workterra is a smaller organization you guys may not be familiar with. It's a Ben admin company. It's based out of California and it's owned by Career Builder. It has a brand new user interface and it really looks outstanding. And again, it's a little smaller, but it's been competing really well with some of the larger players in the benefits space. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on Payroll. They have a really interesting offering of what I would call it decentralized products. They allow you to pick from their own proprietary products and some third-party integrated products, in many cases, all in one contract with one service team. So it allows you to give this best-in-class tech with really competitive pricing. In my opinion, it's one of the best values that you can find in the HCM space right now. So that's the skinny on some of the new products and highlights, you guys. I do want to talk just a little bit about trends that I've been seeing as well. The first is dashboards. If you look at any of these organizations, or again, any of the hundreds more that are out there, the odds are the home screen or your landing page is going to be a dashboard. It's cool. You can have easy access to data that matters to you. They're all very customizable. The other item is change management. It's a theme in this space. As you start to look or shop for any of these technology products, implementation is hard. It's really hard. And so change management is really important, not only from the vendor, but use a consultant like me, or the change management aspect of it is critical. Also, promotional offerings, right? You got to ask for these when you're in the sales cycle. A lot of vendors offer things like free EDI files, or even a few months free, right? You just have to ask, right? You can pay a sticker price for a car if you walk into a dealership, or if you ask for certain things, like you can get them. It's no different in the HCM space. Another trend I'm seeing is this kind of centralized versus decentralized approach, right? So we just talked about Paycor, and I think some of the pros of a really decentralized model, but there's still many organizations that have a centralized approach, right? There's one database, there's one proprietary platform. Ceridian comes to mind, Paycom comes to mind. And again, I think there's pros and cons with both. And Paycor is certainly not the only one with a decentralized platform. UKG, Paylocity, or a few others that come to mind. So it's important to know what technology you're looking at, if it's decentralized or centralized, so you can take advantage of some of those benefits. And then lastly, in trends, paying employees in crypto, right? Not a service that I've seen from many vendors yet, but there's some headlines about athletes and even recently a political figure asking for their entire salary in crypto. Depending what happens in the market, the demand for this could grow pretty quickly in the coming years. But I do think we're still probably a few years away from people wanting to be paid in crypto. So why are we talking so much about payroll, you might ask? And it's because many of the top HCM platforms are payroll companies, right? Everyone needs payroll, and that is a logical place to start your tech search. So a quick disclaimer before I jump into this data: it's survey data. This is not the end-all, be-all of the marketplace. This is, however, the most comprehensive survey data that I've found available, and it comes from an organization called Seubert Insights. Now, this data is refreshed every October at the HR Technology Conference in Vegas. So this is fresh, right? Just a couple months old. Now, starting with a large market, going back to Workday. I think we all know Workday is like the gold standard in HCM. And for perspective, Workday requires you to purchase the entire platform. Typically, those fees, even on the lower end, can be upwards of $200,000. And that makes this platform unattainable for many organizations under about 1,000 employees. Now, these top players that we see on the left are highly customizable. They're going to be big, expensive projects tailored to your business. So Infor, SAP, Oracle, they're just not going to be relevant for many of us on this call. They are enormous investments of time and resources, but to their credit, they're able to tailor these platforms to your existing processes, but they're really aimed at the enterprise market. Now, Sticking in the large market for just a moment, you'll see ADP here has multiple products across actually all the market segments here. And that brand recognition, I think, is what helps them gain some of this market share in the mid and smaller markets, even though these are all completely different ADP products. So that's something unique. I'm going to skip the mid-market, you guys, for just a moment and look at the small market. I think that's most relevant for us. The small market is defined here as under 2,500 employees. So UKG is pretty dominant in this space, at least this year, right? And that, I think, has a lot to do with their merger with Kronos, Ultimate Software and Kronos. And they have a new and expanded portfolio of products. In the small market, you'll notice what some people call the P, right? We talked a little bit about Paycor, but Paychecks, Paylocity, Paycom, the Pays, right? So this is where I think you go for value, right? This is often going to be decentralized, but really top tier and competitively priced products. The other thing I want to highlight here is that other is a huge category in the small market. These can be some of the boutique players like a Sync HR or iSolved or APS Payroll, not to mention managed service providers or resellers can all fit inside that other category. And going back to the mid-market momentarily, I think it's a blend between what we see in the small and the big, with the difference being whether the mid-market companies are after that big custom tailored solution or if they're more concerned with value. So Ceridian and UKG also play really nicely in that mid-market space. So in this data, we can see a little bit beyond market share. We've got vendor satisfaction graphed against the user experience. Now, I think that this mirrors the market share pretty well, actually, and UKG and Ceridian are clearly selling and delivering a product that's resonating with clients. Another item to notice here is that even the objectively worst vendor is still above neutral and past good, right? That has a lot to do with COVID, I think, and in my opinion, watching this data shift year over year, there's a newfound appreciation for HR technology. We've probably all noticed just how reliant we are on it. And I'm happy to see, again, year over year, this data is getting better and better. The scores, I should say, are getting better and better within this data. So you might be asking, okay, now that sounds great and probably expensive, but here's where I think you'll see the impact from your dollars. Engagement is going to rise because employees perceive companies with a slick and easy to use technology system as organized, more legitimate, and faster for them. If you have a paper process today or even dated tech, when employees interact with the HR function and they can experience this new and easy HCM platform, they're going to mention it to their peers, right? Like at the water cooler, and that organizational perception will shift. So imagine your employees doing everything HR related on their phone, and how it would make them feel to have that ease of access. And you can actually measure that with built-in survey tools. So a great time to do that is after open enrollment. How easy was your enrollment? How much faster was it, right? The Ben Admin systems are a great engagement tool, and they allow you to highlight things like even employer contributions to those benefit programs and benefits that employees may not even be aware of. So having all this integrated or in a centralized place means employees feel empowered to access the data they need, and they will require far less interaction with your HR team. This allows HR to focus on some bigger and broader organizational initiatives. And last but certainly not least is cost savings. Bundling these products, just like a home and auto policy, for example, you can get these really steep discounts by buying these things from one vendor. So how do we go about procuring some of this amazing HCM tech? Well, I just so happen to be a consultant, so I want to walk you guys through how I do it, and you can feel free to engage with me or copy my process. But it starts with discovery and recommendations. So we'll do an in-depth needs analysis that includes setting objectives, understanding your current challenges, and gathering all of the system requirements. Next, RFIs can be sent to several vendors, and once everything is compiled, I'll put together a detailed findings report. This includes finalized requirements, market insights, a list of best suited vendors for your consideration, as well as pricing estimates. And then phase 2 would be our vendor selection. So we'll work together to identify which of those best suited vendors should give us demos. I'll schedule, attend, review all demos presented by those vendors, as well as provide a scorecard to you so that we can have an objective review of what we saw after each round of demos. So I'll give my thoughts on which vendors should move to the finalist stage and manage those meetings on your behalf as well. But one of the most critical steps is going to be pricing negotiation. The entire consulting process naturally creates competition. So using that along with vendor relationships will drive that price down, usually $2 or $3 per employee per month on average. Then at the conclusion of this phase, the final selection, of course, is yours. And my objective here is that your decision will be made with the full confidence of the winning vendor. Now, aside from selecting the right vendor, you also have to get it implemented, right? Now, this phase is critical to the success of the client-vendor relationship. The best possible products, poorly implemented, are going to continue to cause stress, for you and not deliver the results that were promised. So, our project managers, they continue advocating for you and ensure the success of the effort. They'll oversee your key milestones and help lift a lot of the administrative burden from you. In many cases, they'll be able to configure the system, especially in the Ben admin world. It can be quite effortless on your end. We talked a little bit about change management earlier. Sometimes this is handling notifications to old vendors. It can be employee communication, but it's really the foresight to plan for what will be different and being prepared for it. Most companies change vendors once every few years, maybe. Our project managers do it every single day, right? So ongoing support means we're continuing to serve as an escalation point for your new vendor. We'll make sure that you're receiving adequate training on the new tools, and we'll be available to help expand into new products as those needs arise. So I've added a recent case study here that we can use as sort of a proof of concept, right? This is a property management company with 600 employees. They had a Frankenstein of HR tech tools that were not integrated, or at least not well. And they were enrolling in benefits with paper applications. They were processing payroll in-house with their accounting software. They had a separate time and attendance tool. None of those things talked, right? And the number one issue with this organization was that they had about 90 properties, right? And each of those properties funded the payroll for the employees that were at that location. And not only did that change regularly, but we had paper timesheets going up sometimes, but the data was a nightmare, okay? So what did? We were able to recommend and implement a true HCM platform for them, including an industry-leading time and attendance tool. And this allowed them to have their employees enter time into the same system that's fully integrated with payroll, with accounting, so they could do all of those advanced allocations that were required by each property. It sounds great, right? But we did hit a bit of a snag in implementation when the vendor confirmed that their time and attendance tool could only accommodate 50 allocations per pay period, right? So you may remember this company had 90 properties to allocate for. And this was a showstopper. This is code red, right? We've contracted with a vendor that is now telling us they can't meet our needs. Goodness gracious, what are we going to do? So because of the relationship that we had with the vendor, we were able to get custom coding quoted, right? And that came in just north of $40,000. We negotiated that fee down to $28,000. Mostly because the vendor had in fact promised that functionality in the sales cycle, and it was outlined in our initial needs analysis. So those remaining fees were spread out over each month of the last year of that agreement. Now, the vendor gets loyalty out of the client, and the client gets a working platform. Now, the client is fully implemented at this point, and they've reported back to me that their HR teams hours spent in technology have decreased by 20%. Now, this was achieved through the data integrations that we helped them build. And it's implementing software that allowed more employee self-service, right? Mostly in benefits and time. In addition to that, their total HR technology spend was decreased by 28%, even with those added coding fees. So I think bundling those products together along with partnering with us allowed for those significant discounts. The client can now allocate that budget elsewhere. So of course, I'd love to work with all of you, but the timing isn't right for us. I want to give you just a few things to keep in mind as you might look for some help from a consultant. You want to start by looking at their expertise. I would look for somebody with at least 5 years of consulting experience, but also 5+ years of internal HR experience, even if that benefits, any internal HR experience is going to be really helpful. You want to make sure they can speak to the current trends, of course, emerging technology, and have some data to show you about the marketplace and the current environment, much like we did just today. It's also good to ask about how many vendor relationships they maintain and how they leverage them, right? Next, I would ask them to explain their consulting role. Ask how many vendors they typically present. It's going to vary, but it should be, in my opinion, between 4 and 7 vendor options. They're only showing you 2 or 3 options. It may be indicative of a consultant that's simply going to sell you licensed technology, right? A resold product, rather than suggesting vendor options based on your actual requirements. So they should be using words like advocate and advisor, and you may even want to ask, how are you going to handle the pricing negotiations? Because a good consultant is going to save you thousands of dollars per year here. And then finally, you want to find out the width and breadth of their implementation services. Are they able to take on some of the administrative tasks like requirements gathering and converting data? Or are they simply sitting on your calls, right? The value of an implementation project manager should be in the time that they save you and the issues that they're going to see coming because of their experience, right? No implementation goes perfectly, so you want somebody in your corner that's going to advocate for you and be able to have the foresight to see some of these issues before they become huge problems. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to me be a complete nerd for about 30 minutes and open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate your time and kind of walking through that. We do have 3 questions that came in. You might have addressed one of these, but within HCM, there's all these different buckets: payroll, time off, ben admin, and how often do employers really change different components of that, given, I don't know, turnover in a certain role, or they were used to something in the past? What do you see in regards to the change of any said system?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about when we're changing these technology platforms, getting just buy-in to change from leadership down in the HR team, right? And that doesn't need to be from day one, right? So there are many times that I engage with an organization where just the HR manager can see a need for that change. And we'll have several discussions that can kind of help them frame why that change is needed and sell that internally to the other stakeholders in the company to get them on board. So I don't know if that answered the question, Eric. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. I'll see if anything else comes over on that. Second question, Stephen, is many companies want to have integrated HR systems that also have financial management abilities. Do the vendors or trends that you see include that component for let's just call it C-suite executives in the financial management field?
Yeah, it's a great point, Eric. And I think what the standard is that I see most often is you have a general ledger integration with the accounting platform, right? So there's a general ledger file that the payroll system will spit out, and that happens on every pay cycle. That is typically the extent of the financial integration that's needed between those two platforms. And again, the benefits deductions, for example, like those are all going to the payroll system, right? Like it all exists within the HCM ecosystem, right? And then that general ledger file goes over to accounting. But that's a little different in an industry like construction, right? Where you've got an ERP platform or something like a Sage or those accounting platforms. Sometimes they're running payroll in-house, and that's a totally different approach. In an industry like construction, where there's all this job costing and things that happen within their ERP platform. But certainly, it's just data moving from that tool to that tool. Infinitely more complicated than that, but really, in a nutshell, we can usually figure out how to get the data you need here over here.
Got it. As far as implementing any of this, Stephen, I think the more time the better is usually the answer, but based on if it's just been admin, full HCM, like what do you recommend, whether we're engaging with our clients directly with you or they're doing something off to the side, kind of set the stage for like what they can expect as far as implementation timelines on this stuff?
Yep. Great question. I think if we're running through our typical vendor evaluation process, that's going to happen before we start implementation course, right? And that is usually 6 to 12 weeks, right? It depends on how many vendors we want to look at, but I think 6 to 12 weeks is a good benchmark for doing a proper and exhaustive vendor evaluation. Then that implementation timeline, again, just a general benchmark is going to be around 120 days for a full HCM platform, right? We're talking Ben admin only, and we're relatively standard or typical organization with a typical benefits offering. We'll probably knock that out in 90 days, maybe even 60 days. But 90 to 120 days, I think, is applicable to HCM and benefits administration.
Got it. Thank you. And then as I guess this is as our clients really evaluate the benefits that they offer so that employees can personalize them. I don't know if it's worksite, all these ancillary carriers that are in play, from my experience, certain carriers help subsidize costs. Sometimes it even becomes free based on what we're looking at. But are there any, flags or anything attached to these HCM companies not accepting them or being creative with how we compress some of the cost of these HCM technologies to produce additional savings to our clients?
Yeah, I think the negotiation stage is huge, right? There's tons of opportunity to negotiate. I mean, these are big organizations that mostly are going to present you this solution, and it's going to be very detailed, but everything is on the table to negotiate. Like I said, sometimes even 3 EDI files, right? If you have 5 or 6 of those, and those are $1,500 a piece, that's a pretty significant cost savings. But focusing on trying to reduce the per employee per month fee, that's what's obviously going to save you in the long term, right? I wouldn't worry so much about a big implementation fee, and the subsidy question, again, I think it's really important to work with Eric on trying to procure some of those subsidies, because they can be enormous. They can cover your entire implementation, your consultants' fees, and part of the ongoing platform fees. So it's a great point. Just generally speaking, you guys, I think when you look at these platforms, somewhere between $17 and $25 PEPM is pretty typical for an HCM system. On the benefits side, you might see something between $3 and $7, depending on what sort of additional services you might buy.
Got it. Do one last check here. All right, well, that was the extent of our questions. Thank you all very much for your time. Going forward, at Seubert, we'll be hosting webinars likely on a monthly basis. So stay tuned on that as far as the content and agenda attached to it. But thank you, Stephen, and thank you everyone for your 40 minutes today. I hope you have a good day and look forward to seeing you all soon.